Who are the top 5 dynasty quarterbacks as the 2023 NFL season is set to begin? We're talking all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or enter promo code LockedOnNFL for a water bottle with any order. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise you. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me, as always, is former NFL scout Matt Williamson. Find Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, we have finally made it. It is kickoff. It is week 1. We are here. I know you're excited for it.
Super excited. It always stresses me out because I go away every
Yes.
Labor Day weekend and hang with my buds, and we party it up, and we have our fantasy draft, our home draft that we've been doing for like 25 years. So I always kind of take that time off, which is great. But you and I were just talking off the air. Like, I've actually built a spreadsheet this year for we're going to record this Peacock and Williamson here, and then the Steelers show and this Dynasty, and it's a juggling act. And then after a week or two, I settled down. I'm like, okay, I got this. I can fit it all in a day. But right now, it doesn't feel like the puzzle fits together.
Yeah, the content schedule certainly gets busy as the season kicks off. That's one thing we deal with here, but that's definitely part of the fun as well. And we're certainly glad football is back this week. Matt, we're going to kick off this week talking some new ADP. We do have new September DLF Dynasty ADP. So we'll over the next 2 days, we'll look at all 4 positions, starting with the quarterbacks. And a couple of surprises here. I mean, we've talked before in past months about how tight this group is, but there's a couple names I guess I'm surprised to see out of this group of top tight ends. We'll get to those though. Okay. But let's start at QB1. Patrick Mahomes is the dynasty quarterback one. We've had some flip-flopping here. You know, it's been Josh Allen at times over the past few months, and I don't think Jalen Hurts has actually taken the top spot in DLF Dynasty ADP, but he's certainly in the conversation, and that is the order of the top 3: Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts. We're not really necessarily talking overall ADP here today. We're focused on position by position, but I will tell you, Patrick Mahomes comes in at 13th overall, and this is single quarterback data. So he's the 2.01 pick, and we don't see Josh Allen's actually a second rounder as well, but later in the round. So what do you think about these top 3? Any arguments, and do you see them as the clear top 3 tier?
Yes. Well, mostly.
Okay.
Splitting hairs, I would still take Allen over Mahomes just for rushing. And I mean, they're really, really close though. So the gap between 1 to 2 for me, and it would go Allen and Mahomes, is definitely less than the gap from 2 to 3. Now, I have great respect for Jalen Hurts. I had a lot of questions about him, even as far as this point last year. But when we're talking dynasty, I have no concerns about Hurts for redraft. But if we're talking dynasty, I basically know to my core that Mahomes and Allen are going to have great careers. I mean, like great, maybe Hall of Fame careers while Mahomes is in. Hurts, I just don't know that. I mean, could he take a step back? There's just a little more certainty of his career path than those two.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I mean, we have, we have kind of apologized because we were both doubters when it comes to Jalen Hurts. As recently as this time last year, questions about what his not necessarily ceiling questions, but really floor questions. You know, could he improve as a passer? And obviously he He certainly did that and has put himself up here among the top fantasy quarterbacks in the game. And, I think you could argue top quarterbacks in the NFL in general. But you're just saying he doesn't quite feel as safe when you're thinking long term. And I don't know if I would agree with you, but I guess I get the concern that, things could suddenly fall apart. I don't think we've seen any hints of that, certainly at this point.
No, I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Right. All right, let's continue. So we've got Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts as the top three guys. And again, Mahomes and Josh Allen, both second rounders in this ADP. Jalen Hurts is an early third rounder. So all pretty close there. We see a wide gap until we find the quarterback 4, who is down in the late part of the fourth round. It's Lamar Jackson, Matt. Lamar Jackson back up to the quarterback 4. He had fallen out of this group of top 5 quarterbacks for a while, especially earlier in the offseason. But not only is he back, but he's in that quarterback 4 spot. How are you feeling about Lamar Jackson as we get ready to kick off the season?
I'm feeling great about him. I think him and Hurts are neck and neck for 3, to be very honest with you. Now, my tune could change slightly if I see another injury. It's to the point where it's been too many years in a row where late in the year he's banged up. And I do have slight doubts about the offensive scheme change, not big picture, just to start the season. It could be a little bit of a growing pain here and there. But right now, he's closer to 3 than 5 for me. I'm all in.
Okay, well, that's fair. I'm definitely excited about Lamar this season as well. But I get your point about having at least a few concerns or hesitations about the start of the season. We don't really know about the health of Rashad Bateman. Mark Andrews has missed a bunch of practices. We don't really know the story with J.K. Dobbins yet either. Sounds like he's good to go, but there was that combination of an injury issue and being unhappy with his contract. So while there have certainly been some good signs for that offense this offseason, including bringing in Todd Monken, at least we expect that to be a positive. And the addition of Zay Flowers is one I know dynasty managers are definitely excited about. There's a few things to be watchful of as well in Baltimore. So we'll see how they start the season. But again, Lamar Jackson back up in that QB4 spot among the top dynasty quarterbacks in the game. We're only looking at the top 5 quarterbacks here today, Matt, and QB5 is Joe Burrow. Kind of a tough offseason, or at least preseason for him as well, as he's been dealing with this injury. There was a comment, I guess yesterday, from the coaching staff there that Burrow is still day to day. So kind of leaving it out there that he's not necessarily a lock to play week 1. We've all been assuming that he'll be good to go. And I still think that will be the case. But that certainly wouldn't help if he's not able to get back on the field to start the season. But here he is in Dynasty as the QB5. Thoughts on Joe Burrow? And there's one guy I've got to ask you about that's not here too.
Yeah, and maybe it's the same guy, but I would have Herbert over Burrow. Herbert would be my clear 5. It shocks me, considering both their momentum, positive, negative, that's not the case already. And I'm not ready to go there, but Burrow versus Lawrence for 6 is at least a discussion for me.
Okay. All right. So Burrow is 5, as I mentioned, and Herbert was the guy I had to ask you about.
I figured, yeah.
He is 6, and they're actually back-to-back, so maybe we shouldn't argue this too much. Joe Burrow is the 48th overall pick, so he's the last pick in the 4th round. Justin Herbert, the first pick in the 5th round. So essentially their value is identical. Trevor Lawrence, you mentioned that name as well. He's down in the 6th round. So at least according to ADP, not necessarily close to Burrow or Herbert right now. Overall, how do you feel about this order? Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Lamar, and Burrow. What would you change if these were your rankings?
Allen slightly over Mahomes, Herbert at 5. So they're not wholesale changes. I mean,
not
Herbert and Burrow at 5 and 6. I'd change Allen and Mahomes at 1 and 2.
Yeah, not too crazy for sure.
How about
you mentioned, I think I would push Herbert up as well, over Burrow. I mean, these guys, they really are tightly packed in there. I'm with you on being higher on Lawrence. That would give us 7 total quarterbacks. What about Justin Fields in that conversation for you, or a clear teardrop from Lawrence to Fields?
Clear teardrop, because I know in 2024 Lawrence will be the Jags starting quarterback. I hope Fields will, but they could have a terrible year, and those 2 first-round picks might end up getting, somebody else. I mean, he's not out of the woods yet.
So you would say kind of how we felt about Jalen Hurts a year ago?
Very similar, yes.
Okay, all right.
High upside, no doubt.
Justin Fields is the quarterback 8, and he's actually just right behind Trevor Lawrence in our ADP, just a couple spots behind. So said we would give you 5 quarterbacks. We gave you a couple of extra: Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Jackson, Burrow, Herbert, Lawrence, and Justin Fields. Those are your top quarterbacks in Dynasty right now. We're going to continue this conversation, move over to the running back position, and we'll do that next.
So, Ryan, I mentioned I spent the weekend at Deep Creek, with my buddies, Labor Day weekend. We do that all the time. Whole time I was there, I wore my Bird Dog shorts. Love them. They look great. They're designed to fit much slimmer through the thigh and leg and give you more of a sculpted look, but they're just super comfortable. I mean, in that environment, I wasn't even worried about looking good, just hanging with my buds, but they fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restrictive cotton. And they're almost the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They have this cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, and it stretches to get you a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement at all. We're playing all kinds of outside games and stuff. Didn't have a problem at all. They have an anti-stink sweating wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day. And they're flat out functional for all occasions. We'd go out to dinner or whatever. I didn't change, none of that stuff at all. So they also have a water bottle and other products that, that are fantastic. So here's what happens. I mean, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or enter our promo code LockedOnNFL at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle when you order. It's phenomenal. I use it all the time. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you.
Thanks again for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. The Locked On Ultimate NFL Season Preview is here. The 7-episode extravaganza brings opinions, analysis, and plenty of debate from all 32 of our Locked On NFL hosts, with added insights from our national experts. It's a can't-miss series before the season kicks off. Catch every episode on Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Matt, let's continue taking an early look at our September ADP. By the way, this is not on Dynasty League Football yet, so consider this a sneak peek. We'll be on the site very soon for those DLF subscribers. Matt, let's talk running backs here. Bijan Robinson, still the running back 1. No surprise there. He is 3rd overall in that ADP, and he's the only running back in the top 6. I don't think we need to say much about Bijan at this point. We're just excited to actually see him officially on an NFL field come later this week. Matt, the RB2 is maybe more of an interesting discussion because it's Christian McCaffrey, the veteran running back. We know we love McCaffrey. He's been in that RB1 conversation for years and years now. But at his age and with the injury questions, I mean, last year was great, but we know the 2 years before that he missed most of those seasons. Do you feel good with McCaffrey at the RB2 spot and at the 7 overall spot in our ADP?
I feel comfortable with the RB2. There's definitely more than 7 guys I would draft in the first round of a startup, though, than McCaffrey. I mean, he's an all-time great fantasy producer that's basically in his prime. He would be my first pick overall in redraft. And if we do take that theory of, running backs should be redraft almost as much as dynasty, then he should be 2. But at this stage, early September, it kind of feels like he's 2 by default because I don't see anyone at the moment that's banging down the door. Maybe a Gibbs or a Hall or a Walker, or some young guy could hit the season on fire and start banging on that door. But right now, I think he kind of sits there by himself.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that's a good argument that maybe he's the RB2, but not necessarily deserving of that top 7 spot. He and Bijan Robinson are the only running backs in the top 10. So conceivably could move him down. For example, he's above Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, some of those young wide receivers we like. I would take all of those over Christian McCaffrey if we're doing one of those late startup drafts right before the season begins. He's not my RB2. I did get a little aggressive and move Jahmyr Gibbs up to RB2 in my dynasty rankings. And it is Gibbs who shows up as the RB3 here in our data. So we've got 2 of the top 3 running backs as rookies from this 2023 class. I don't know. McCaffrey, again, looking at McCaffrey from the overall standpoint, I just couldn't spend a first rounder on him. He's guaranteed to lose dynasty value over the next year. I think regardless of how he plays and what type of season he has. And, if he does suffer some type of relatively serious injury, the bottom could really fall out. I mean, look where guys like Kamara, Cook, et cetera, are being valued now.
Strong point.
The reality is we could be looking at that type of fall over the next year for Christian McCaffrey.
I love that you said there's nowhere but for his value to go but down. And I know that you never invest in those guys, which makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah. Again, like you said, we know we know we can trust him production wise in the short term over this season. So I get the lofty ranking, but just not one I would invest in. If I've already got him on a dynasty team and I'm contending, I'm likely holding and kind of seeing how this season goes. I wouldn't necessarily consider him a must sell. But if you could move from him to Gibbs or Breece Hall, one of those younger guys, that is certainly worth exploring. What do you think about Gibbs at 3, Matt? Too aggressive for you?
I'm pretty high on Hall, who we can hold our tongues on for now, and they're starting to get some good buzz about Hall. So there is buzz about Gibbs though too, in that it sounds like he's going to line up at receiver in some capacity, slot, etc. Maybe even McCaffrey-esque right from the start, maybe even more than I suspected, which makes all the sense in the world because my big concerns with the Lions have been, who are the pass catchers not named Amon-Ra St. Brown? Well, if Gibbs is doing some of that stuff early on, that's great. It's also good for Montgomery's status, and to do the more traditional knee-biting running back stuff. But I just don't know Gibbs is going to score a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah, that was an interesting quote from Ben Johnson, the Lions OC. Essentially, everyone is going to be shocked at how we use Jahmyr Gibbs. And it's like, what could really be that shocking at this point with that type of athlete? I saw somebody joking that he would play quarterback. That would be the shock. But I think we can assume that means they're going to line him up out wide. And we saw some of that, at least heard reports of that in training camp. So yeah, that wouldn't be that much of a surprise. It would be good for his fantasy value and production, I think, but not a real shock. We'll see how they use Gibbs. I'm excited to see him in that NFL kickoff against the Chiefs on Thursday night. RB4 is Saquon Barkley, and we'll go ahead and throw out the other name you already mentioned. RB5 is Breece Hall. I was a little surprised to see Barkley ahead of Breece Hall here. And again, it's close. They're both coming off the board as mid-second rounders overall. But Breece Hall, if I'm moving Gibbs down, it's probably for Breece Hall, not Barkley or McCaffrey.
Yes, and I'm not going to crush the guy, obviously, but I think Barkley's one of the more overrated fantasy assets in Dynasty or redraft. I mean, he looks the part, Quadzilla. He's super high pick. I mean, his highlights are awesome. He catches the football. But he's been a lot of inconsistencies through his career, including how he finished last year. I mean, his last month, 5-6 weeks were flat out bad and heavy workload last year. I don't think he's for me.
I guess I just think about Barkley, and when I'm thinking strictly dynasty, I prefer Gibbs. I prefer Breece Hall, mostly due to age, but a few other things, some of what you mentioned there with Barkley as well. And then if I'm thinking strictly redraft or very short term this year only, I'd rather have Tony Pollard. I'd rather have Austin Eckler. I'd rather have, maybe even Josh Jacobs and Chubb. So if I prefer some of the guys below him long term and I prefer some of the guys below him short term, then that probably means he's a little overvalued in my opinion. So Barkley at 4, Breece Hall at 5. We will continue this list and finish up the top 10 dynasty running backs according to DLF Dynasty ADP. We'll do that right after this.
So Ryan just mentioned the Thursday nighter coming up. I mean, I couldn't be more psyched for that. Couldn't be more psyched for the NFL season. It's finally game week. So get ready for that NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel. Of course, they're America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. I mean, this is the best offer you're going to see. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props to more, so much more on there. So visit FanDuel/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
All right, Matt, let's continue the running back conversation here. We've got Austin Eckler as our RB6. Matt, I did hear some concern about Eckler that the new Kellen Moore offense there with the Chargers could result in more downfield passing, which would, of course, be good for our guy Justin Herbert that we already mentioned, good for those receivers with the Chargers, but maybe not so good for Austin Eckler, who caught a ton of dump-off passes really throughout his career, but especially the past couple of years. Do you see Eckler taking a step back this season?
Not so much, because he is my 3rd overall redraft player, but I kind of feel like he's holding on for dear life career-wise for these kind of conversations. Not like he's going to stink next year, of course. So I think this is a little rich for somebody his age, and those concerns certainly exist. I like Chubb better. I like Pollard better. Frankly, I might like Kenneth Walker and Ramondre Stevenson better, considering the age.
So we've talked so much over the years about that class of 2017 running backs that gave us really, honestly, game-changing, dynasty-changing players. And the only 2 guys from that class left among our top 10 here are Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. Of course, that means Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Leonard Fournette, and several others have fallen off in value, at least fallen out of this top 10. So if I tell you one of those guys is outside of the top 20 running backs this time next year, you expect it to be Eckler rather than McCaffrey, it sounds like.
Yes, I do. I mean, McCaffrey, I think, is a little safer.
Okay. RB7, RB8, a couple of guys who have really risen up the board in redraft leagues as the season approaches. Tony Pollard and Nick Chubb. Both of these guys feel like they're in for huge 2023 seasons. I think it's a conversation, especially between Pollard and Eckler when it comes to dynasty, Matt.
Yeah, Pollard versus Chubb's a tough one for me. I would have both of them over Eckler. And I think Chubb would be number 1 of those 3. I really do think his receptions spiked this year. I'm actually in the middle of doing Steelers Browns. I know this is way ahead of schedule in terms of like the stat pack I do. That's the week 2 Monday nighter. But I mean, I have some crazy stats on Chubb. I mean, he's only played like 53% of his Browns offensive snaps since he's been there. I mean, what if that goes up to 70? I mean, and how about this? I mean, there's been 129 instances of a running back averaging 5 or more yards per carry if he has 190 carries or more. Well, the leaders in the clubhouse are like Jamal Charles has done it 11 times. Barry Sanders has done it 10. Jim Brown's done it 9. Chubb's done it every year he's been in the league. I mean, he's 5
Nice.
for 5. I mean, he's like an all-time great, and he's only hitting his prime. It's bonkers.
Gets a little disrespected and pushed down the ranks in Dynasty, mainly because of that lack of PPR upside. So like Matt says, if that changes even slightly this year, then he could certainly be a riser even at his age. That's the other thing. Came into the league a little bit older, basically the same age as those class of 2017 guys we mentioned, McCaffrey and Austin Eckler and the rest. RB9, I don't even know if we need to talk about him at this point. Yeah. It's Jonathan Taylor. We've mentioned his name so often over the past couple of weeks, thanks to all the drama there in Indianapolis. We know we will not see him for the first 4 weeks. So if anything, we're going to see him continue to lose value. Some of the names that have been mentioned in this running back conversation could obviously jump up and overtake him, including guys like Kenneth Walker, Ramondre Stevenson, who are kind of looming outside of this top 10 and others. I don't think it would be a surprise at all to fast forward a month from now and JT be out of the top 10, really out of the RB1 range altogether. Matt, let's finish up here with the RB10. Josh Jacobs finally starting to bounce back and gain a little bit of value after his hold in, contract dispute, whatever you want to call it. It came to an end. He gets a reworked 1-year deal, very similar to the resolution in New York with Saquon Barkley. So seems like everybody's happy. Also seems like this might be the last year for Barkley in New York, for Jacobs in Vegas. Next offseason could really be wild when it comes to the running back market. But for now, Josh Jacobs will be a Raider for the next year. And I mean, I don't expect him to match last year's numbers. I think that team overall is going to take a step back, but I still think he's being undervalued in general.
I do too. There's a handful of these names, and I think I'd take Jacobs certainly over Taylor. I know there's an asterisk by him. I think he's right there with Barkley, which would probably be my running back 7-ish. You know, I would want Chubb over both those guys. I would want Jacobs over Eckler. I think Barkley and Jacobs are almost identically valued, but one shouldn't be 4 and 10.
Right. Totally agree.
Okay.
Those are your top 10 dynasty running backs. In order, that was Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall. Those are the top 5. Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, and Josh Jacobs. The top 10 as the NFL season begins. Tomorrow, we're going to continue this conversation. We'll talk those pass catchers, top 10 wide receivers, top 5 tight ends. So check back in with us tomorrow. But that's going to do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Remember to follow the show at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL. And I'm Ryan, MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.